but it has certainly been a great privilege to have got to serve my local community in the way I have. So I've enjoyed it enormously. Um, we used to do a lot of member events before COVID. We had great member events. We had evenings about diabetes care management, and we had evenings about improvements to musculoskeletal pathway, and we had insights into how to get the best out of your appointment at the eye centre, all sorts of things, a really eclectic mix of events. And it was a really lovely, lovely thing to do because it gave us a much closer relationship with patients, with service users, with carers, and frankly, just with interested members of the local community. And I don't know how it's been for you in your various walks of life, but we found that it's been quite hard to get back into a pattern of doing the things that you did so easily and relatively effortlessly before COVID. It's a bit of an effort to get all of back up and going, and not least of all in the context of the pressures there are to recover waiting lists and all of those other priorities we've got. So we're having a bit of a brave new departure this evening, and we're going to try one online. So it's the first one we've done online. Mind you, we did lots of online things during COVID, but it's the first sort of member event we've done online, and we've no idea whether it'll be a roaring success or a bit of a flop. But we will ask you to bear with us while we try it out. And hopefully it'll be an opportunity for us to have a good conversation in a fairly relaxed, informal way about what's happening at the hospital at the moment, and we'll make sure that there's loads of time for you to ask questions. And in fact, we'll probably do that first, because what it is we choose to tell you should be shaped by what it is you'd most like to hear about. So we will go to play it that way. Now, I'm not going to go around the table, so to speak, and ask everyone to say who they are and where they come from, because that will probably take the whole hour. But I would like to make one or two key introductions, if I may. So the folk we have on the call this evening are governors. We have governors on the call. We have some of the non-executive directors of the trust on the call. And we have colleagues who look after this part of the business from the governance team and from the comms team. But most importantly, we have you who are members, or at least I hope you're members. And if you're not members of the trust, I hope we'll have convinced you to become members of the trust by the time the hour's up. But from those groups, what I would like to do is invite a few colleagues to say hellos and introductions. So our lead governor is Carol Warren. And Carol, I wonder if you'd be kind enough to say a little bit about who you are, where you come from, but also maybe what has inspired you to become a governor and how you're finding it.
Hi, good evening. I'm Carol Warren. I've been a public governor for 18 months and a lead governor for about 6 months now. I applied, put myself forward for lead governor on retirement. I did work at the Chesterfield Royal Hospital for 22 years. I was the manual handling advisor. I always knew that when I retired, I wanted to keep active in doing something, and I was particularly keen in becoming a governor if a position became available. So it just happened. Retired November, became a governor December. So the timing worked out really, and it's nice to see the hospital from a different perspective. And like a lot of people, I got a lot of governors say, they just want to sort of really be active in the hospital and how a hospital works and how it's run, and if we can help in any way to do that. As I say, I'm from Scotland. I don't know if I've still got a Scottish accent. I don't hear it, and I never listen to myself basically. So, but I've been down here for quite a few years. I've certainly been in Chesterfield for about 30 odd. That's me.
Thanks very much, Carol. And the other person I'd like to ask to say hello and tell them a little bit about who you are is the backbone of the Council of Governors, and that's Nicola Smith. And Nicola, albeit she doesn't look old enough, has been in that role since the hospital became a foundation trust. So she's had that same role all the time. And without blowing our own trumpet too much, other hospitals look in and they go, oh goodness, your Council of Governors runs really well. And we say, well, we do have a secret weapon, and that is Nicola. So I'm going to invite Nicola to say a little bit about who she is and where she comes from and what looking after the Council of Governors entails, Nicola, and the sort of rhythm to our business and what it is we do and those sorts of things.
Of course. Thank you, everybody. And it's really nice to see some familiar faces around the virtual table as well, that members that have been coming along to our events for quite a few years now. This is kind of our first, or a bit about me. So as Helen says, I've worked here for 18 years now, looking after the Council of Governors and the members at the hospital. I really must work out how many governors I've seen throughout my time here, and it would be quite a few, I would imagine. But it's a role that I really enjoy working with. I think moving forward and sort of following COVID, we're really keen to get membership events back up and running. So this is kind of our first step into what membership looks like and getting you all involved again. So it's great to see some of you here this evening. Looking after the Council of Governors, it's challenging but yet rewarding in equal measures, I would say. They are a fantastic group of people that just want the best for our hospital, and I think every one of them comes with their own heart on their sleeve, if you like. They're all here just to make it better for our patients, and that's all thanks down to the members and the governors, really. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you very much, Nicola. So I'd just like to put members who've dialed into the call on notice that we're going to be coming to you in a few minutes for questions, but just to give you notice of that, I'm going to say a few words about what the role of the Council of Governors is and consequently what that means for the dynamic with members. Yeah. So I'm going to try and give you, there's loads of books and diagrams, loads of things produced on all of this, but I'm going to try and give you the kind of layman's version. So the Council of Governors is the kind of highest authority in the hospital. They have a very small number of very potent powers. Yeah. So they have to use them judiciously and wisely. So they hire and fire the chair. They hire and fire the non-executive directors, and they hire and fire the external auditors. So those powers that are enshrined in legislation, yeah, mean that the Council of Governors can in effect get anything they want to get done. Now, they can't rock up at the hospital on a Monday and say, you know, I want all the corridors painted pink, because clearly that will be a deeply operational matter and, you know, wouldn't be appropriate. But if they had real significant material and strategic concerns about the direction the hospital was taking, yeah, those three levers in effect allow them to make the necessary changes. Yeah, so they're very significant, they're very deep, but they have to be very wisely used. And no single governor has any power in their own right. Those powers are enshrined in the council. So working collectively, they hold those powers. And then there's a very subtle thing that goes on, which you might think I'm playing with words, but it is very important. So the governors hold the non-executive directors to account for the performance of the board of the hospital. The non-executive directors hold the executive to account for the performance of the hospital. So again, that means that governors don't come to meetings and say, you know, why are we 5 operations behind on, you know, whatever it might be, hip replacements. They come to the Council of Governors and they say, can the non-executive directors assure us that we're hitting our targets in respect of surgery? Yeah. And then it's for the non-executive directors to get into more of the detail with executive colleagues about why and what the issues are and what the challenges might be about meeting our targets in any particular way. And the reason it's set up that way is because the key and really important role that governors have is to be the bridge back out to the community and to be the bridge to the members of the trust. So we've different sorts of governors. We've got publicly elected governors that come from all the different parts around Chesterfield. We have staff governors who represent different staff governors within the trust. And then we have what are called partner governors. So partner governors come from places like local government, from the voluntary sector, from the universities. They're great partner governors in terms of education and training for, you know, young doctors and nurses and all the rest of it. So we've different sorts of governors, and each of those different sorts of governors need to be reaching out of the hospital into the membership, into their constituents, so to speak, that they understand what's important to the local community, and then they can be bringing that back into the hospital. And that's why they need to be doing that, while the non-executive directors then are focused on the actual performance of the hospital. And as the chair of the trust, you are chair of both the board and you're also chair of the Council of Governors. So they do this nice diagram, the powers that be in the NHS, where they have the chair sitting on the very pointy bit of a seesaw, trying to keep all these things in balance. But it doesn't feel all that complicated in practice, to be honest with you. Not least of all because we've got a very engaged, very well informed and very challenging set of governors. But I have to say it's done in a very constructive and a very, very thoughtful way. So I hope that's enough to give you a bit of a flavour about the Council of Governors and what it is they do and why it is they have important and specific responsibilities with respect to members. And we've loads more we can tell you, but we won't until we know what's on your mind. And if there's anything you'd like to know, and there's no daft questions, we'd be happy to know. And it doesn't have to be a question, just if you've got a thought or if you've a bit of feedback for us or whatever it might be, we'd be delighted to hear from you. And it's always hard for somebody to go first, isn't it? So we might have to sit in companionable silence for a moment. But, oh, somebody's put up their hand. Splendid. David P., please.
Good evening. Good to see you. I've visited, excuse me, I've visited the hospital a few times recently, and compared with other hospitals I've been to, it's really a lovely site to visit. Lots of green trees and, you know, quite modern buildings. But it did occur to me that one thing's lacking, flowers. There's a move, excuse me, there's a move to plant wildflowers at various sites. Councils do it, individuals do it. Roadside verges in some places are covered with them and they look absolutely superb. I wondered if there was any chance that some of the green space within the hospital grounds could be planted with wildflowers to cheer it up even more.
I think that's a lovely prompt, David. And of course, being a beekeeper, I'm very fond of wildflowers and I have plenty of them. I don't know the answer, but if I was to guess the answer to your question, I suspect we probably haven't had them before because we've probably also had contracts about cutting the grass. And the contracts probably got pared down over the years to be the cheapest possible way of cutting the grass in straight lines. But that said, we're just about to review our green plan, which will, you know, will consider a whole load of issues about access to the site, about sustainable transport to the site, about reducing our carbon use, about getting more sustainable forms of energy, and of course how it is we kind of do our bit for biodiversity and, you know, wider environmental agenda. So I think that's a very timely prompt and question, and we'd be happy to take that one away.
Thank you. You never know, if there are enough flowers on site, you might be able to put a few hives there.
That'd be good. Yeah, and thank you for kicking off, David. It's always hard to go first. Is there anything else in anybody else's mind? Ken D. Ken, you're on mute. I know I asked you to go on mute, but you need to come off now. Thank you.
That was me trying to not disturb everybody. Good evening. I'm in a similar role to David, and I chair our local practices patient participation group. I have to say that generally the relationship between that practice and the hospital seems to be very constructive and positive, and when patients need to go to hospital, it seems to happen quite well. Is there anything that the trust does to monitor that relationship between the practices within the area and the hospital itself? as to any potential weaknesses in terms of how, I don't know, how things are referred? I'm not pointing at any problem. I'm just asking a question as to whether it's relevant to as an area to look at.
I'm sure, Ken, it's very relevant as an area to look at. In two regards. So as a hospital, we've got two different sorts of relationships with primary care. We have the relationship with the kind of bulk of primary care, the different practices that exist across the patch. And then we have the relationship with the primary care that we wholly own. So we own a number of GP practices under the banner of Royal Primary Care. So if I could take the first bit first, and then we'll maybe do the second bit first, and then we'll come back to the kind of wider primary care bit. I think Jane's on the call, who's a bit of an expert in primary care. So I might get you on the second bit, Jane, about the general relationships, if I may. But the relationship with Royal Primary Care, we took it on initially because there was a problem with a particular practice that was struggling in the context of some challenges they had. So we kind of stepped in to make sure that we didn't have a load of patients in locations close to the hospital who had no primary care, that of course would have put a load of pressure on the front door of the hospital had we not been able to get them that care in the right setting. And kind of our interest and involvement in primary care continued and grew from there. But one of the other reasons we were keen to do it was that we saw this was an opportunity for better integration between primary and secondary care. So there's a lot of things that happen in hospitals, whether they're minor dermatological procedures or whether it's some sort of diagnostics or scanning, that could actually just as easily, if we found different ways of working, happen in a primary care setting. So we definitely think about what the kind of patient journeys from primary care into the hospital are, and consequently what it is we might do in places that are close to people where that is within our gift. We have to be a bit careful about doing that because we obviously want to do it, but we don't want to do it in a way that kind of discriminates against people who are not in primary care practices that have, are under the auspices of the trust. But we do like to do it where we can and where we legitimately can, and indeed where we can bring those ideas about good practice to other parts of primary care. The wider point about the kind of interface between primary and secondary care more generally, I don't know, Jane, would you like to comment?
Thanks, Helen. It's a good question, Ken. So I would say around the wider area of primary care, if we're talking about GP practices rather than we're talking about community services, etc., I'm assuming you're referring to GP practices in the first instance, yes. So all the practices in a neighbourhood have to work clearly quite closely together. And we have a number of primary care networks set up in Derbyshire now where practices are grouping together to provide a broader range of services than just what you would consider to be normal general practice. So that's one thing to think about. Our own practices are grouping together to form a primary care network, and that's important to us because actually we already have the number of patients that you need to form a network, and that's really in our patients' best interest. But that network still needs to work very closely with the rest of primary care. I think one of the interesting things is that the system, so what we might refer to as Joined Up Care Derbyshire, has lots of information on every single GP practice and referral pathways, and particularly things like use of accident and emergency services. So which patients are going most frequently in and out of accident and emergency or using the GP service at the hospital. So that might give us some indication of the quality or the access available across Derbyshire around primary care more generally. So there are lots of strands of information that we can use and we can access, but particularly we would be really interested in patient flows, particularly to and from primary care, particularly into our hospital. But I think the primary care network bit is really important because that's really about the kind of the way of the future, if you like. So what services can we deliver? Can we get into the community, and what can we deliver in the community rather than having people come to hospital? Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons for bringing this up is we have a meeting next week, and I'll mention this session at that meeting. I was wondering whether there was any mileage, and I don't know whether there is, in trying to find out how our patients feel about that that link, if you like, between the practice and the hospital, and if they found that that's actually worked fine for them. Yeah, both in terms of referral and then also in terms of, you know, ongoing management, because to be honest, I've just been in the hospital today and I've been discharged. That's good, but the specialist who saw me said, I'll stay in touch with your practice and give the practice the, you know, if you like, the parameters to monitor you. And if you stay within those parameters, fine. If you go outside those parameters, the practice will get back in touch. So that's a sign that, you know, there is a joined up approach to that whole thing, which is good. I don't know whether I'm an exception, yeah, or that's something that, you know, that generally applies both ways. And I, you know, it's something I can ask the GP who's on the patient participation group. What do you feel? Yeah, if she puts her head in her hands, we may have an issue. If she says generally things are fine, but why don't you look at asking patients these questions? Then that's something we might look at. I'm not saying I'll take it any further tonight. If it comes up that sounds like something useful, I'll get back in touch, yeah, and say, well, is this useful to you as well as us? And how do you want us to gauge that survey? Because we often do surveys of patients. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ken. That was a great question. Very grateful. And thanks to Jane for those thoughts and insights too. Partha, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I've been in touch with a few of my general practitioner friends. Apparently, the primary care, it's regarding the primary care, obviously, they are finding it difficult to recruit the trainees, the GP trainees, because they cannot find a suitable accommodation. I think they probably come at a time for 3 months or something. To find a long, duration accommodation may be easier, but 2 to 3 months at a time maybe could be difficult. I was just wondering, is there any way we can help them out? Like, maybe it may not be a big number considering the size of the primary care setup attached to the hospital or something. If they can be provided some kind of accommodation in the hospital with junior doctors kind of thing, will that be possible if you can discuss with the hospital authorities or something else?
Thank you for that idea, Partha. To the best of my knowledge, I think the small amount of hospital accommodation we have is kind of bursting at the seams. But it's a good prompt that we should be thinking about how that resource best serves patients by looking at it across the system, not just in terms of the hospital needs. So thank you for that thought, Partha. We will reflect. Ken, you're on mute.
Okay, thanks. 2 points really. The first one is I went to an event which will indicate how long ago it was, which was held at the B2B Stadium as it then was, the Chesterfield Football Ground, which was actually brilliant, very, very well organised, lots of information. I haven't been to any subsequently, but I would say more power to your elbow organising events of that sort. I think it's really powerful. The second point I wanted to make was there have been very, very significant changes during COVID and since about face-to-face contact between patient and practitioner. Now, I think a lot of us will know what's been happening at the GP level. I wonder what the position is and whether there is a policy developing at the hospital about face-to-face contact between patient and practitioner at the various clinics that the hospital runs.
Yes, I think the first thing to say, Ken, is that the obvious thing about face-to-face contact is we're much pleased and relieved that unless certain and particular circumstances apply, that we're not all back in our masks. So unless there's a particular sort of vulnerability, that face-to-face contact is happening in a kind of non-masked sort of pre-COVID way. To the best of my knowledge, the majority of clinics are back to pre-COVID practices. So, you know, the kind of default position is face-to-face clinics. Now, I appreciate that we managed to move something like, I think, 80% of our outpatient appointments online and remote virtually overnight. And it was found in a small number of areas that worked particularly well. And of course, it depends a little bit on the patient. So for some patients, it worked very well, and it particularly worked well with patients who might have had family at a distance, where they wanted to be able to involve the family in the consultation too. So that kind of worked. So we do accommodate it if there is a particular need or requirement or preference of the patient. And where a small number of clinicians have found that it has been more effective and suits their patients, it has continued. But the default position is we're kind of back to pre-COVID business as normal ways of working. And I think Nicola should probably take a bow. She was probably the B2B lady.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Now, anybody else have any questions or comments or thoughts or even feedback if they've been at the hospital recently, how it is they found it? And Richard.
I'm the chair of a Chesterfield Cardiac Rehab group that meets at the gym. We're all ex-patients of the Royal, but we lost a few members with COVID, and of course the referrals stopped with the COVID because they weren't holding any rehabilitation classes in the hospital. But now things have picked up a bit. We're still not getting any referrals through, and you know, we're not sure what's going on because it is quite important. I think the nurses, cardiac rehab nurses, did tell us that there were more younger people coming through with heart problems, and they didn't have time to do rehab in the community. They went back to work. But the older ones, because of COVID, seem to be less energetic and, you know, weren't going in for rehab in the community. But it's peculiar because it's thought to be very beneficial, cardiac rehab.
Absolutely.
And keeping it up after the hospital program. It's very strange.
It is, and I'm glad you've raised it. And I have to be honest, Richard, I don't know what the answer to that is. But we had a brilliant presentation at, I think it was about 2 board meetings ago, about how it is we're getting people kind of, it's like pre-rehab, getting people ready for operations. Because there's some really powerful research about if you've lost a bit of weight, if you've got, you know, you've kind of maximized your mobility, you know, done kind of a few powerful things in advance of your operation, that your length of stay in hospital after your operation significantly reduces. And of course, the less time you're in hospital, the less risk there is of decompression and all of those things. So that was lovely to hear about, and it's clearly up and running and running very well. So I do know that that sort of focus and groups and coming togethers are happening in the hospital. For the cardiac rehab specifically, though, I've no idea. But we will take a note and we will go away and find out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not at the moment. Would people who've dialed in like to chat amongst ourselves for a bit? So that you've got the benefit of, you know, just, we could give you a little readout, if you'd like, from some of the items we considered at our Council of Governors meeting, which was only, was it yesterday or the day before?
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yesterday. It's been one of those weeks, I'm afraid. Would that be of interest to, you know, members who've dialed in? Yeah. And then what I could do is I could then put, we've got Carly on the call, I think. Do we have you on the call, Carly?
We do. Hello.
Could I put you on notice to maybe do a bit of a trailer for the member strategy? Yeah. So I'll buy you a bit of time to have a think about that, whilst we just have a bit of a recap on how it was we found the Council of Governors yesterday. Yeah. Is that okay?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Sounds good. Very good. So we had a number of items at Council of Governors yesterday. We had an item we always have, well, not always have, regularly have, which is a load of reports from the non-executive directors to the governors about priorities the governors have set out for the non-executives. So we had reports on how it is we're progressing in rural primary care. We had reports against how it is we're doing against our operational key performance measures. We had a report from Jane about the work of the Quality Committee. And we had an update on how it is we're doing kind of in respect of our kind of digital program of transformation and change. And that's always a very, it's very engaged session, and there's always lots of questions from governors about all of that. Carol, would I be putting you on the spot if I asked you how assured or not you felt governors were after receiving the kind of update against the success measures?
Yes, I'm getting used to you putting me on the spot, Helen. So I'm getting I'm getting better at it. I'm waiting for it. Yes, the one thing that I found yesterday is that we governors tend to have an awful lot of bits of paper to kind of read through, and what I liked was that those reports were quite succinct, so that it was like the bare bones of what we actually needed. And if we needed more information, then we would have received it. So I think that's quite helpful. You know, when you've got 82 pages, you're just kind of, but if it's down to sort of the 4 or 5 pages that it was, I appreciated that. And it was a lot easier to actually take that information on board. So it's hopefully, you know, that I'll understand a little bit more when I've read it, but very, very, very good, and good questioning between the NEDs and the governors. Yeah, and that's good, you know, that we feel able to ask the non-execs questions. And then it's about understanding what's actually coming back to us so that we know that we're actually being effective holding the non-execs to account. You need that kind of good relationship. When we've got so many new governors, we're all on a learning curve, aren't we, together, just finding out about each other and how we can communicate effectively. So that was very clear yesterday. Yeah.
Good. That's nice to get that feedback. And then after that, we had, I thought, a really excellent presentation from our relationship lead with the Care Quality Commission. So, you know, the Care Quality Commission is one of the regulators of the Trust. And she's our particular lead, and she's also an inspector who inspects the trust and indeed other trusts. And she gave us an update about how she felt, you know, the hospital was doing and some of the changes that are taking place at the Care Quality Commission in terms of their approach to regulating and looking more at systems now, about how it is systems are working, not just about how individual hospitals or other providers are working in a particular geography. So it was interesting hearing about some of the changes there. I slightly put her on the spot at the end, and I said, how long was it going to take and what were we going to need to do to go from good to outstanding as a trust? So she danced around that one on me a bit, said it was more than her job's worth, was more than her job was worth to kind of put her nail her colours to the mast on that one. But it did open up a helpful dialogue where I think, you know, if I was to sum it up, she was impressed with, and she said this in public, which I thought was rather nice, with the leadership of the trust. And she thought that all the kind of ingredients were in place and that we were doing all the right things. And, you know, the sense really was that, you know, it was about embedding and sustaining the good approaches we have, yeah, rather than any expectation from our regulator that we were going to be doing new or different things. So I thought that was really nice to hear, and she took all the questions in good spirit and heart, which I was, you know, very impressed about. And then after that, we had one of our colleagues, Clancy Josie, to come to talk to us about freedom to speak up. So we've lots of ways in the trust to make sure that colleagues, if there's something on their mind or something concerning them or something worrying them, to have the opportunity to say it. And we encourage people to say it to their line manager, but sometimes it's not always easy to say it to your line manager, particularly if the issue relates to something that's happening in the team. So nationally, there's this approach called Freedom to Speak Up. On every hospital has a guardian, a Freedom to Speak Up guardian, and they are somebody that you can go and talk with if you're having issues. And honestly, the issues can range from, my locker is in the wrong place and I'd like it to be 2 along because it's closer to my bike or the showers, or it's at the right level to get my hairbrush out, or whatever it is, yeah, through to really significant issues about, you know, unhappiness in teams or concerns about approaches or leadership or ways of working, and there's all points in between. But Clancy comes at least twice a year to the board to tell us how many cases she's dealing with, what they, obviously it's all confidential, but she can tell us about the themes, what the themes are, what the issues are. And of course, there's a whole load of toolkits and approaches, so you can tell, and you're measured nationally about if you've got the right number, because not having a small number is not necessarily a good thing. Having a big number can be a good thing, because it means that everybody feels safe, and it feels safe to say what you need to say, yeah. And they have, I don't know how to calculate it, some equation, but anyway, whatever the equation is, the answer is we've got the right number that tells us that, you know, people are happy to say what it is they need to say. And it goes alongside, I suppose, other indicators we have of how people are feeling. So a really important one in that regard is the staff survey. So I'm really delighted to tell you. Well, the staff story is a story of 2 halves. So this year we've got a bit worse than we were last year, which is not a good thing, because obviously you want to be getting not worse, not better, yeah. But we are really good compared to everywhere else. And in fact, on some of the key measures in the staff survey, like, would you recommend this as a place to work? Yeah, we were in the top 7 in the country. So when I came to the trust all those years ago, we were absolutely down kind of in about the bottom 10, and we're now right up in the upper echelons. And that has been a long and sustained and a journey we've invested in heavily, because at the end of the day, as a board and as the Council of Governors, I often say the only thing we need to do is to serve and support our colleagues who work in the trust well, because if we do that really well, they are the people that know how to serve and support our patients and our communities, and all will be well, yeah. So we really have focused on that. But then we can put together, you know, if we see in the staff survey pockets of concern or unhappiness, and particularly if they line up with kind of issues or themes that are coming from Freedom to Speak Up, it gives us more information and intelligence about what it is we might need to do, how it is we tackle, and how it is we go about all of that. So it was really helpful, I think, for the governors to get kind of, you know, a sense of all of that. So that was another key issue we discussed yesterday. You're back on the spot, Carol. Do you think, did governors enjoy that? And did you think that conversation was a good one, or?
Yes, I think the staff survey is something that governors are very engaged with, isn't it? Because it's something that we can measure, and we can pull out any themes that we've actually got within the hospital. And as a previous staff member, I'm always reading through it, thinking, how would I fill the staff survey in? And one of the things that I always ask is that at the end of a survey that a member of staff completes, there's a free text page at the back, where you can, if you haven't been asked a question on something, but you want to have an opinion, then you can write it. And as most of my colleagues would know, I always filled that page, and I always put my name and extension at the bottom, just in case they want case they wanted to get back to me. But I think it is that's a good opportunity of staff not just answering the questions, but having an opportunity to say, well, actually, I'm a bit concerned about this or that. And we did get some of the comments about the free text and the feedback that we got from the non-execs this year. And that then leads us to, well, you know, let's actually look at that, and are the things that we can actually do to help resolve those issues, and perhaps going back to departments or members of staff if there are particular things, and that might resolve itself, or it might be that the non-execs might actually take that up to the execs. So again, that line of communication is opened and can be used. So the staff survey is a really, really useful way. And some staff would say, well, there's no point in filling it in, but I would always say to people, if someone's asking for an opinion, write it down, even if they don't want it, you know, then at least we know that we've tried. So I think that the good response, that's quite telling after COVID, isn't it? To actually have those reactions and those numbers and statistics compared to some of the other trusts that we know of. Definitely, yeah.
Thanks, Carol. So they were some of the big ticket items from the COG meeting, which was only yesterday. So if there's no questions or comments about any of that, oh, there's one from Atul. Atul, evening, Atul.
Good evening, everybody, and my apologies, I've joined you late. So forgive me if you've already raised the point I'm about to raise. And what I wanted to mention, and particularly to the members, new and old, that when I first joined, by the way, I'm a non-exec director, and I've been on the board for about 4 years now. And when I first came and visited our accident and emergency department, I was absolutely horrified. But the good news is that, you know, visiting our brand new accident emergency department, our emergency department, it really took my breath away. And it's so great to see a project within the NHS that's come in below budget and earlier than contracted. And talking to some of the people who are involved with it, the kind of, if you like, the love, devotion and care they put into planning for what's going to be, it's not just a building, but how patients, members of the public going through it would be experiencing things and what they can do and trying to future-proof it as well. So I just wondered whether it might be something that new members joining might be invited to come and have a look around at some stage. I mean, obviously operational pressures are there, and we have to be mindful of that. But I think it is really a spiffing thing. It's a great project, and we've also got the Health and Wellbeing Hub for our staff, which is going to be open shortly. So there are new things happening on site, and if members haven't been on site for a while, then I think it might be something to try and get them to see and have a look and wander around.
That's brilliant, and thank you for that, Atul, because of course we did that tour of the new ED department yesterday, just before COG, and it was lovely to hear governors arrive going, oh my God. And obviously I've had several tours around it, but I did own up to the fact that the first one I did, where I saw, I mean, it was all still concrete at the time, but when I saw what the new resus was going to look like with our own blood bank right behind the resus, I felt a bit kind of overcome, thinking, goodness me, you know, we're a relatively, well, we're a mid-sized district general hospital, absolutely state-of-the-art facility now that complies with every last requirement of, you know, the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, and it is wonderful. So it's a great call, Atul, and we should definitely make that up, including also the Health and Wellbeing Hub. We're very, very blessed in Chesterfield because we've been good. I mean, we're under a lot of financial pressure now, and we're in the risks of going along into the ranks of the unwashed, those who are in deficit rather than in surplus, I'm afraid to say. But I mean, it's a national phenomenon. It's not that we've been feckless or reckless with our financial stewardship, but because we've had so many years of having a modest surplus, we have been given free rein in terms of how it is we made our capital investments. So Atul's just described vividly two fabulous most new ones. But also for those of you who haven't seen it, albeit it's there for several years now, the Macmillan Centre. So the Cancer Centre in the hospital is the largest single donation that has ever been made by the National Garden Scheme, with huge expertise offered from Macmillan in putting the whole facility together. And we future-proofed that, and we've kind of future-proofed the ED too, in kind of, you know, we went up a tier in ED, and we've always had the ability to go up another tier as and when circumstances allow in future. So we've been very, very fortunate in that regard. We really have. So we need to celebrate and treasure that. So thanks, Aishel. Aisha.
Hi, my name is Aisha Lamin. I'm endocrine and diabetes registrar in Chesterfield Hospital, and we don't usually attend the management like meetings. And like I just had a leadership course today, which encouraged us like to attend this. That's why I attended today, to know more about the NHS structure. And I wonder if we can be involved in this meeting or attend it like what you have said, just the Council of Governance meeting and this kind of stuff. Who I should contact to get involved, or like just attending these meetings?
You will be so welcome. So all our board meetings are held in public, and you're very welcome to come. All our Council of Governor meetings are held in public, and you're very welcome to come. And not to put a fine point on it, we'd be delighted if you did. And if you go on our website, you can see when all of those meetings are, or if you want a personal tour of the dates, Nicola Smith, who introduced herself a bit earlier on the call, and Nicola, I'm sure, will put her contact details in the chat for you, would certainly help you get your bearings and know what's on what day. But you couldn't possibly be more welcome. Ken.
I watched a video that I'm sure came through the Trust link. The manager who was responsible for putting A&E together gave us a conducted tour. It's a great video. If sort of arranging an actual physical trip is too hard, I'd suggest people go and have a look at it. It's really good.
Thanks, Ken. We could maybe, I don't know how we do it, but Carly probably knows how to do it. We put it in the link or on the. You've got your hand up, Carly. You can probably tell us now.
I'll pop it in the chat box at the side, Helen. I've also put a couple of links in there and some information around the opening of the new ED. We'd really appreciate everybody's help in getting out what we call our anti-opening messages. It's new, it's beautiful. We don't want people to come. We truly don't want people to come unless it's an emergency, and we really need help in getting that message out there. So I've put some core messages in, some key graphics that we've used throughout as well, and I will just post the link. We also have just confirmed today, and I'll give you a sneak preview, because hey, who doesn't like a sneak preview, of our Matterport tour, and I will pop that in the chat box as well, so you'll be able to have a full 360-degree tour of the department before anybody else. So just give me a while I post those in. Hopefully that'll entertain you for a little bit longer.
I'm sure it will, Carly. Thank you very much. Is now a good time, Carly, for you to just maybe, we'll use that as a segue for you to do a little bit on the membership strategy and what we might expect and what it's going to mean for members?
Of course, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So for me, and for the entire trust, membership is vital in terms of ensuring that we've got a line of sight, an ear and eye into the communities that we serve. It's one of our strategic priorities to support our communities. And we can only do that if we listen to what our communities are telling us, and that be real and authentic in how we listen to them. Things obviously changed a lot during COVID. People's behaviours changed a lot, and it's quite difficult to preempt and predict how people still will react to communication tools and mechanisms that previously we had a real understanding of who, what, where, when and why in terms of what we were proposing to do. But one thing did didn't change, and that was the Trust's want to ensure that members had a real voice and were played into service improvement and delivery. So we looked at the membership that we had, and we have revamped that in terms of wanting to go for a quality over quantity approach to our members. We had in the region of 13,000 members, but engagement was very, very limited. And that was proven when we went out to those members and spoke to them around redefining their interest with the organisation in terms of how they wanted to connect to us, the area of their interest, how engaged they wanted to be, and how involved they wanted to be were key factors for us. So under GDPR, for those of you that know, a legislative requirement, we went back out to our members, re-engaged with them on the area of interest, level of interest, and also trying to understand skill set and expertise. You'll all have known it because you've all completed that form, so thank you. And if you've not, please do sign up to be a member. We also wanted to be clear on the benefits and the purpose of how we will ensure that our members are truly shaping and delivering our services, not to mention all the accountability factors that Helen's talked about, but the detail of the day-to-day service improvement and delivery. So we have 4 key objectives that we're proposing underneath the revised membership strategy: to increase the size of the membership, but also consider the quality, to develop the representation in terms of diversity and equality across our communities, to improve the quality of the engagement and communications that we send out. So, for example, you will have all seen the quarterly magazine that's just been released, and at the end of this month we're also going to be producing a monthly bulletin, which just is a showcase, showstopper of the key important nuggets of information to keep you up to date with what's happening in the Trust. And the last one, which you just expect us to have in around the database, and to make sure that we are following due process across each of those aspects. So the strategy itself is an improvement and a development, but it won't be signed off until it goes to board in September. We are continuing to act on a number of the tactics because it's just the right thing to do, and we're interested in hearing anybody's feedback. So I can send you, if anyone's interested, a copy of the strategy, and hopefully people will see real improvements and developments across those objectives that we've talked about, building on the great successes that we've had so far. I'll stop there.
I think that's whetted everybody's appetite, and obviously when it's published we will find, Carly and the team will find a whole variety of ways to bring members in, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or direct mailings or whatever. So that's just a trailer, and there'll be more to follow. I'm mindful of the time. I think, Nicola, I might give you the kind of last few words, because we've got councillor governor elections coming up, and it might be a nice time for you to do a bit of campaign trailing. Yeah?
Absolutely. So elections run every year, as most of you know, and they're split across, for the public governors, across our 6 public constituencies, and this year we've got vacancies within Bolsover as well as North East Derbyshire. This year it's quite a small election, so when we became a foundation trust we staggered all of our elections just so that we didn't wipe out our full council every year, every 3 years rather, when we do our elections. So this year it's actually quite a small election, but we'll be going out round about the end of September, beginning of October. So we'll be really keen to fill those seats on the council. But similar to what Aisha said, if anybody wants to come along to our council of governor meetings to see what they're all about, to watch our governors in action, you would be more than welcome. We finally yesterday moved back on site to the education centre, which was a long time coming, but we're finally back on site. So it was nice to have everybody back in the hospital again yesterday. So hopefully small steps into getting back on site, as well as membership events as well. I think just to add to that, obviously today's been the first one that we've run for quite some time, but we'd really like some feedback into what you'd like to see in the future. So if you've got any ideas, if there's any specific topics that you'd like to hear about, then we'd be more than open to suggestions. You can either drop me an email, I've put my email in the chat, or you can contact any of us through the website. There's also a general email account that you can send any suggestions through, but we'd like to hear from you to see what we could do in the future for you.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Nicola. And you, please do take Nicola up on that offer. She's not just being polite, she genuinely would like to know. But before we close tonight, could I invite a few comments about, have you enjoyed it? Was it valuable? When you go into the kitchen now to put on the kettle, will you be thinking, well, that was an hour well spent? Or you were thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure that's what I expected. Because any initial thoughts or feedback will be really welcome now. You can't go shy of me now. We know each other. We spent the last hour together. So getting thumbs up. So that
Yes, certainly. Yeah, I think this kind of meeting, it can be done without having to meet in person, and perhaps it can be done more often. That will be useful, I suppose. That's my thinking. And also give opportunity, because like we had today, the guests can ring in and give their opinion and ask questions and things like that. That will be useful. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else feeling brave enough to say now what it is they've made for the last hour?
I'd just like to say I've enjoyed it. I shan't be going into the kitchen wondering what I should and shouldn't have said, but I would like to praise Atul for bringing the word spiffing into the conversation. I thought that was magnificent.
Very good. Well, as you can see, the offer is there to, and particularly to come back with ideas about, because we kind of developed, because this is the first one we've done, we had a fairly broad kind of range of themes tonight. But if you've got strong views about, actually, we'd really like to hear about this thing or that thing or something in particular, do let us know, and then we can kind of plan to have these on a kind of more themed basis going forward. So I'm definitely bound for the kitchen and a cup of tea. So I will thank you all very much for dialing in and taking the time to be with us this evening. And I cannot tell you how pleased and relieved I am, and I'm sure all my colleagues will be, that you've all been so forthcoming and so willing to kind of make comments and observations and ask questions, because that's what it's all about. So thank you very much for that, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.